He's a New Zealander based in Thailand. He's coached in more than 20 countries around the world. He's written ebooks. He runs a podcast called The Coach's Handbook. He's a great friend of mine, an awesome coach, an out-of-the-box thinker. Welcome to Off Court, Paul Dale.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Paul, it is a pleasure to have you here. I know that we've been talking about these things for months, for years, and more recently, quite a lot, about bridging that gap from the practice court to the match court. Is it possible to do? How do we do it? Your ebook talks about it, the 3 a.m. theory. We're dying to hear about it. Can you tell us what the 3 a.m. theory is?
Well, Jason, you and I, we've talked a little bit in the past about the difficulty for players all around the world, not just in this region, but all over the world, of taking their great form from practice to the match court, where they sometimes they can't reproduce the form that they showed on the practice court. Parents talk about it, players talk about it. Now, many years ago, I was traveling with a Thai team. We came out of Bangkok and we went to an event, and we arrived late at night, and we had a practice court booked early the next morning. And so we were out there, but obviously a lot of us were a bit fuzzy because of the trip the night before. But one of the things I noticed at that time was that one of the players I was with, Tamarine Tunasugan, was hitting the ball as sweetly and timing it as well as she could. And of course, Tamarine later became number 19 in the world WTA ranking. And at that time, I was watching Tammy, and all the other players in the squad were hitting the ball well too, but not to the level Tammy was. And I began to ask myself, what was that I was seeing? What was present in Tammy's makeup, her DNA, that produced that flawless out of bed onto the court, and she could do it. Timing, decision making was all there. And then years later, when Paradon Sichapan, who became number 9 in the world ATP, came into our squads, he had the same ability. But all around him and Tammy were very good players. But the fact was, I remember once actually looking at the makeup of the teams, and the number 1 player had the best 3 a.m. and the worst player had the worst 3 a.m. And then I knew I was really, this ingredient, I knew I was on to something. And so I began to sort of look to try and find out what this 3 a.m. element was. And that's where the term actually comes from an imaginary situation where you have, Federer and Nadal in an apartment near courts. And at 3 a.m., we go into their room and say, Rog, Rafa, you're going to play a tiebreak. And we get them down onto a court, we turn on lights, and without a warm-up, they have to play a tiebreak. Now, I know for a fact that tiebreak, the level of that tiebreak would be extraordinary. The decision-making would be perfect. The technical part would be perfect. The other part that would set them apart from, say, mere mortals like you and I, Jason, is that if I was to wake you up at 3 a.m., your first reaction would be, I'm a bit stiff, Paul. I got a bit of a stiff hamstring from the day before. Let me do that when I wake up later. Or I've broken a string in my favorite racket, or my favorite shorts. I washed them last night; they're not dry yet. And I've heard that from Indian players I've been with, actually. So just to the mere mortals like you and I, we have 100 reasons why we can't play at 3 a.m. in the morning and play at our very best. Whereas what I've noticed is the very best players can do it any time, any place, any racket, any surface, any. And so when I coined this phrase, the 3 a.m. theory, it was about the time I began to try and look to see what elements are present in a 3 a.m. type player. And knowing that if I could find them, and then I could take those elements which I discovered and take them to every player I coached, I'd be the best coach in the world. Because basically I had the key to unlock every player in the world. So over the next couple of years, I began to try and understand what those elements were. And what I've found is that the elements that consist of 3 a.m. are completely lacking in most practice courts around the world. And those elements are decision making, playing under stress, creation of the point, finishing the point, and so on and so forth.
So, Paul, I want to, you've wrapped this up pretty nicely. You've outlined what the 3 a.m. theory is. You've given us a really cool reference point, and I definitely don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. to play a match, but maybe you'll help me work on that at some point. But what I want to know is, how do we create this 3 a.m. environment on the training court?
Well, we immediately get rid of my biggest bugbear in coaching is the repetition drill. I'm astounded when I look at the social media posts on Instagram, watching players, jump a hoop and a coach feeding from the hand about 5 meters away, the same ball, back over the hoop, back to the ball, back over the hoop, back to the ball. I mean, it looks amazing, but it has no relevance to what's going to happen in the match, apart from as a physical workout. And I understand that. But there are elements of people in the world that are just only doing that. So, eliminate the repetition drill, eliminate 500 ball, forehand 500 times cross court, because there's no decision making, no creation of a point, no finishing of a point. There's nothing present that we will need the next weekend when we go to play a tournament.